Research begins at the University of Florida, but its impact is felt in every community. Through a unique partnership with Florida's 67 counties, IFAS delivers research-based solutions that matter. In this podcast, we share the stories of innovation shaping agriculture, natural resources, health, and resiliency across Florida. From Studio 67 in Tallahassee, I'm Eric with the Institute for County Government, the training and education arm of the Florida Association of Counties. And this is the Campus to County podcast. Joining us on our new podcast titled From Campus to County, and the goal of the podcast is to highlight the unique partnership between IFAS and Florida's 67 counties. We were talking about earlier, I think it's appropriate to have you on as our first guest on this podcast, since you were actually one of the first individuals we had in our new studio back in, it might be 2021. It was kind of in the waning days of COVID, but it was, I think it was your first week on the job.
It was.
So we recorded a nice welcome video message from you to all the counties where you promised that you would visit each one over the course of a year. And I think you delivered on that promise. But so if it's okay, let's start with a little audio biograph of you this time and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, first of all, it took me 2 years to visit all the counties, so I didn't quite deliver. But eventually we got to 67, and Ginger was able to join us for that county as well. I've been at the University of Florida for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years. Most recently, I was with the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. That's kind of the research arm of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I was a presidential appointee, and I worked for Secretary Sonny Perdue at the time. A couple of years before that, I spent a lot of time in Africa running a fairly large nonprofit that worked with smallholder farmers, teaching them how to grow more food, and about a decade misspent in Georgia as a dean of agriculture there. A great place and a great job, but it was, at least on the football field, it was misspent.
So one thing I've learned is that IFAS is big. And in fact, Ginger and I, one morning when you were serving in an interim position as provost for the university, Ginger and I were just trying to get a lay of the land of the organizational structure of IFAS. And so maybe you can, break this down a little bit and just talk about the land grant mission that UF has that I think a lot of people aren't even aware of. And, Florida A&M is also similarly a land grant institution. So can you talk a little bit about what that means for Florida and just for counties in general?
Yeah, and let me answer that by talking a little bit about the history of the land grant system. It was back in the early 1800s. There were a number of universities in the United States, Harvard and Yale and Princeton and University of Virginia, and they were all kind of what we would now think of many of the Ivy schools, Cornell as well. But they really weren't educating people beyond just the immediate needs of things like classic languages and philosophy, things that weren't really helping an emerging country grow in the way it was needed. So there was a realization that we needed to have a more practical education in the United States. We got into the Civil War, and it got complicated at that time. But once the war had started and the South had succeeded at that point, then the bill to create the land grant system was introduced. It was not vetoed or voted against by the bloc of southern states. And so that's what began it. It began in the middle of the Civil War, but it was to provide what then was called practical education. It was agricultural education, engineering, military arts was a big part of what was taught back then. But it really taught people to do things that were important for a country that still needed to grow. And then there was a realization and an understanding. This was during the time of segregation, obviously. African Americans were not permitted to go to college at that time, and so the historically black system of land grant colleges was created. They were meant to be separate but equal. They never really were, but that was established at that time to train African Americans. And then in 1914, there was also a realization that both for the University of Florida and the Florida A&M, we weren't getting the information out to the people who needed it. We were publishing in journals and we were talking to each other, but there was a lack of ability to push that information out to everyone. And so that's when the Cooperative Extension Service that works so much with your institute was created, and that was specifically to take the information from FAMU and from UF and then give it to mostly the farmers at the time, but also homemakers. 4-H was established for youth, and it really became just a fabulous system that I think today is probably just as important as it was back in 1862 when the first bricks for this system were laid.
So let's start from, I guess, 1914. So the extension provision of land-grant institutions, that applied in every state that had one at the time? Or is it unique to some of the southern states like Florida?
No, it was established in every state. And by then, we were starting to build even more land-grant universities. We had the original ones, which we call the 1862 schools, what are still today referred to as the historically black campuses. That was in 1890. But then tribal nations were added to that mix throughout the 1900s, and even a few Hispanic-serving colleges were established after that time. So there are lots and lots of land-grant schools now. But back in 1862, there were still just a handful of them as the country was growing.
The mission of IFAS is research, teaching, and extension. Can we talk a little bit about each of those pieces and how it relates to how it affects maybe the counties and how the information kind of goes back and forth? You said something very interesting on the video, which is when you don't have the answers, you use research. I think that was a quote from you on the video I pulled. So can we talk a little bit about how that research does get down?
Sure. And the brilliance of the land-grant system is that teaching, research, and extension, which is information delivery for adults, are all combined. It's always called a three-legged stool, and the stool doesn't stand well without all three of those being connected. So you've got research. This is where, when we don't have an answer to a question, we find a way to get that answer. Sometimes it's funded by the local government, sometimes by the state, sometimes by the federal government, often by the federal government, sometimes by private foundations. And then we have the Extension Service. It used to be called the Cooperative Extension Service, and the cooperative term referred to the fact that it was funded by the county, state, and federal government. It was really cooperative funding, is how it should have been described. And their purpose was to get the information to the people who needed it. So it was the ivory tower of a campus where we published in journals and we talked to each other. But it wasn't, as I said earlier, it wasn't getting out to the people who needed it. So the Extension Service then did two things. First of all, they took the information developed here in Tallahassee at FAMU or in Gainesville with UF out to the people who needed it. But then secondly, these extension agents were also embedded into the community, so they went to church and school with the citizens of those counties, and so they would know firsthand what the problems were. So when you're in Gainesville, you don't know what all the problems, Florida's such a big and diverse state. It's hard to wrap your arms around it, but extension agents are embedded within a community, within a city, and so they know what the problems are. So their job is twofold: to receive the information and deliver it, but also then to carry those questions and problems back to the home university so that the researchers now can start working on it. And then you've got the teaching part of it as well. So that's the third leg of the stool. Obviously, we train at FAMU and UF. We train students in all kinds of different things. But the difference between us and Harvard and Yale is that we train people for practical vocation and practical application. We do teach English and history, and sometimes those things are important if you're going to be an English or history teacher. But mostly we're teaching people to be engineers and how to be agriculturalists and how to be communicators and deliver information, the types of things that we're doing right now. So things that have a practical outcome to improve the economy of the state of Florida. And that makes sense. The taxpayers of Florida are paying our salaries, they're paying for our programs, and they want to know what do they get back in return for those hard-earned tax dollars that are being taken from them and transferred to universities. So it's a great system. I think our country really has benefited so many ways from the land-grant system that was created well over 100 years ago now. It's something probably that isn't recognized enough. But we owe a lot of thanks to the Abraham Lincoln and a few other people who had the vision for and created the system long time ago.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit of the history, and it spoke to the federal government actually giving the land to the states, and the states would use the certain acreage of land. They would sell that, use the residual either as a source of revenue, but they use that to actually begin the actual land grant institution. So
that's correct. Land, there was not land here in Florida or, frankly, anywhere on the East Coast to, quote, give away. And so the federal government gave away land in the basically west of the Mississippi. And if it was a new state establishing a new school, sometimes they used that land directly for the land grant university. Other times they sold the land and then used the money for to establish their university back here in Florida, for example. Got a little controversial because some of that land was owned by tribal nations, and I don't know that they would look at it as a gift. They probably looked at it as being taken away from them and then sold. And so there's always been that rift within the land grant system. But having so many tribal colleges now and so many other universities that basically benefit everyone in our society, I think we've more or less gotten over that. But there was a history to this that had to be accounted for.
So in your first 2 years, you visited all 67 counties, and I think Ginger saw you break the tape in, what county was that? Yeah, I thought it was Columbia. So what did you find in terms of the diversity of our state that you think is unique and poses both a challenge for UF-IFAS and Extension, but also a opportunity?
It is a challenge and opportunity, you're right. And that was the main thing I learned, is that this is a diverse state. I've lived in a number of different states. I've never seen anywhere that has as much diversity in people. I'm a soil scientist, diversity in soil, diversity in climate, how the water is managed in the state, where it comes from, where it goes to, the economy of the state, the plants, the animals. I truly don't believe there's any more diverse state in this country than Florida. Creates lots of problems. What we deliver in the Panhandle is absolutely not what they need down in Homestead or the Keys, and vice versa. We have so many climatic zones where we can grow tropical crops in Homestead. The Midwest to me the Panhandle sometimes to me looks more like the Midwest, with corn and soybeans, and maybe southern Georgia with cotton and peanuts as well. So whether it's the people or the agriculture, what I learned is that, and this is why IFAS is probably the largest college of agriculture in the country, not because it just grew organically that way, but rather because it had to be, to serve all the different people and all the different types of agriculture and all the different natural systems that we have, and all the way that we relate to water, whether it's farming the ocean, catching wild fish, or just looking at water quality inland. It's all different. And what you do in the southern part of the state doesn't apply to the north or the central or the east or the west. You need programs throughout the state to address those local needs.
Well, what's interesting is that there is, in parts of the state that I think most Americans, even most Floridians, wouldn't know, that there's an abundance of agricultural land. So I'm thinking, everyone thinks of Palm Beach, right? We've talked about that before. But if you go to the western part of Palm Beach County, there's a significant amount of agricultural growth in that area. But similarly, those areas are also very urban. Is there anything that you saw that was unique in some of those counties in the southeast of the state that do have ag? Miami-Dade's got a lot of ag, but are also urban, where the extension has kind of a combination role where they're doing things that are unique inside of an urbanized area, for example.
It's absolutely true that we have a lot of programs throughout the state, but including more urban areas. And those programs are different. They don't need to be the same as they are in more rural parts of the state. The needs, the opportunities are all different. In urban counties, we do things like nutrition education, for example, teaching people how to understand proper nutrition, how to cook so that their meals are more nutritious. It's amazing how many people in our society don't know how to cook anymore and don't know what to cook. And so this has become an incredibly important program. We have lots of data now for a lot of people in Florida and throughout the world. Their food's making them sick because they're eating the wrong things. And so we teach people what not to eat and what to eat. And food is becoming, it's called food as medicine now. It's something that's a hot topic right now. It is not just food to fill up your bellies and be satiated. It is about food, number one, not making you sick so you don't eat the wrong things. But number two, we now know they're foods that can prevent disease and sometimes even cure disease. And so we're teaching people how to be their own nutritional counselors. We, speaking of counseling, we work on financial counseling as well. A lot of people don't know how to maintain a checkbook anymore. A lot of these basic financial skills. What is credit? How do you pay back money? How do you save to pay back money? How do you budget, both money coming in and going out? A lot of people, especially young people, don't know how to do those things anymore. We have financial training programs to help them. Master gardeners. We help people throughout Florida maintain gardens, establish gardens that protect the environment, that are beautiful and something to be proud of. So we've got thousands of volunteers around the state that we have trained. They have to go through many hours of training, but at that point, they're basically experts in garden maintenance, whether it's a flower garden, a home lawn, or sometimes even ornamentals, but they'll be experts in those areas. And so there's all kinds of things we do, but the bottom line is we do what's appropriate for that community.
I think all of that should resonate with Christopher down at the other end, because he has a garden that he's growing out at the family garden. Food is medicine. I totally agree with that. Thank you for that. And so something that's always interested me, because I'm only interacted with a couple of the research and education centers that IFAS has. Can you talk a little bit about some of those? I know there's, 12 of them across the state.
Well, we have 12 research and education centers. We have a couple 4-H camps as well, where we can even do a little bit of research. We do conduct research in how to teach and reach young people, so that's research to some extent. And we have a couple other demonstration centers where we actually do some research, but we focus more on pushing information out at those sites. But yes, we have 12 formal research and education centers around the state. These often look like college campuses. We have one in Baum, just outside of Plant City, that you would think you were on the University of Florida campus, brick buildings. But there, that's where we do the research, sometimes teach, and sometimes extend information. But that's where we primarily do research that's important to that region. So in Baum, obviously the strawberry growing capital, the winter strawberry capital of the United States. So we do a lot of strawberry research there. And we work at other things, fruits and vegetables in particular, that would be important for that community. If we go down to Homestead, we're working on orchids and vanilla production and tropical fruits. And if you're out in the Panhandle in Mariana, we're working on cotton and soybeans and peanuts. But the research is focused on what that particular region of the state needs. There are some unifying themes to all of this, like robotics and artificial intelligence. That's needed throughout the state in agriculture right now. producing plants that are more nutritious than what we produced in the past. That's a statewide imperative that we are working on. But for the most part, we're looking at weeds that are present in the central part of the state, or diseases or insects that you may find in the southern, maybe panhandle part of the state. So it tends to be focused on just what is needed in that area.
So if I'm a strawberry farmer, I'm simply going to benefit from the research work that's being done outside of the facility in Plant City. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think very directly. And here's the thing. Much of what we do in Florida, at least in agriculture, is through a lot of hand labor. Most of our fruits and vegetables require hand labor. A lot of that's immigrant labor, and we're losing that immigrant labor pretty quickly for lots of reasons. Sometimes state regulations, sometimes it's federal, but mostly it's just because the economies of Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala are getting better now. So there are fewer and fewer people willing to come to the United States to do this hard work. And that trend's just going to continue. 10 years from now, I predict we'll have very little work being done through the hand labor that we have being done now because we won't have the people to do that work. So if we don't have robots in our fields planting, maintaining, harvesting, we will not, this is my prediction, but we will not be the capital of fruits and vegetables during the winter at least, and still growing a lot throughout the entire year that we are now unless we're successful in this area. So we're working with all kinds of people all over the state, private companies, to as quickly as we can develop robots that can do a lot of this work for us.
Where's most of that research being done? Is it done in the facility outside of Plant City?
That will be our, quote, headquarters we do it all over the state, but that will be where we concentrate it because there we've been appropriated by the state legislature to build a building that will be a agriculture, robotics, AI focused facility. We're calling ourselves, and I really think this is happening, we're calling ourselves the Silicon Valley of agriculture. And we are well on our way to making Florida just that. We have to, number one, because if we don't have this happening, we're going to lose a lot of our agriculture in the future. So we need the robots, we need AI, we need data management. And secondly, we think that Florida needs to be where these companies that are producing these new technologies and building them out, sometimes from ideas generated at UF and FAMU, but they need to be here in Florida because this is where the agriculture is. So we're essentially building another three-legged stool when it comes to becoming the Silicon Valley of agriculture for Florida. We've got the research side covered. We've got the fastest supercomputer anywhere in the world in academia. It was donated by the founder of NVIDIA, who was a UF graduate. We've hired well over 100 faculty in artificial intelligence. We're building this new center down in Baum that will be the focus for agriculture at least. And then for students who are going to the University of Florida, every one of them has to take 3 classes in artificial intelligence. So we are a AI university now. They take 1 class in the basics of artificial intelligence, 1 class in artificial intelligence for your own discipline, so AI in agriculture. But we also have AI in law and music and history and medicine, everything at the University of Florida. And then you have to take 1 class in the ethics of AI to make sure students are using this appropriately. But this is the key. You're here, all of your listeners are hearing a lot about artificial intelligence right now. This is the future of a lot of different industries, and agriculture is no different from any of those.
I mean, that's a great goal to be the Silicon Valley of agriculture. And in terms of the technology, what are y'all seeing in terms of the limitations and some of the challenges of that technology as y'all are doing the research and trying to develop and actually deploy it?
Okay, good question. What has changed and what has allowed all of this to move forward? It's only been within the last 3 years. ChatGPT is just 2 or 3 years old right now. Before that, AI was not available. So let me give you an example. We've developed, and other commercial companies have developed as well, herbicide sprayers for spraying weeds in your field. Right now, when we spray a weed in the field, we spray the entire field. We spray the weeds, we spray the crop, we spray bare soil. So we're wasting a lot of the chemical environmental impacts because we're using a lot of chemicals. We now have a technology that allows the spray rig to see individual weeds and just spray them. So they don't spray bare soil. They don't spray the soybean crop or the peanut crop. They only spray the weed. It saves about 75% of the chemical, saves money for the farmer. A lot of this is autonomous now, so you don't even need to have a worker doing this, and it protects the environment. So AI has been the key to unlock all these technologies. I'll give you one more example. Picking strawberries. It's easy for your listeners to pick a strawberry. You look at it, it's ripe, you grab it, you yank it off. That's a hard job for a robot. Is that strawberry ripe? It's not that easy to tell for a robot. And then when you do grab it, how hard do you grab it? If you grab it too hard, you squish it and bruise it. If you grab it too softly, it falls out of the claw. And then once you've picked it, then you can actually look at it again. Does that disease have it, or does that strawberry have a disease? Maybe send another robot out to spray it with a fungicide for that disease. Or is it a big one or little one? Maybe you can pack it right on the robotic harvester. So that's all been made possible because of AI intelligence, which has only been here for literally 2 or 3 years now. But there are limitations. First of all, this equipment is still early stage commercialization or not even commercialized yet, so it's pretty expensive. And so we're questioning how do we cover the cost of a pretty expensive machine when maybe you only have 10 acres of strawberries. So we're looking for different economic models. So the scale up and the cost is still a limiting factor for a lot of this. But just like anything with cars or airplanes, the more you build, the cheaper they get. And so I'm convinced that 10 years from now, we're going to have not 500 horsepower tractors pulling around that cost $1 million each, pulling along these gigantic spray rigs, fertilizer buckets, but they're going to be small, almost desktop type machines that are cheap, they're fast, they're autonomous, and they're completely automatic. So when they run out of herbicide, they're spraying herbicide through the field. When they run out, they go back to the barn and they fill themselves up again. They can run 24/7, no operator, cheap to own, cheap to operate. So that's the goal that we're trying to get to, away from these pieces of gigantic, expensive equipment that burn a lot of fossil fuel, cost a lot to run, back to these electric small vehicles that will save everyone money, and it will allow farmers to reduce the input costs ultimately for the products that they're producing. Right now, these machines are still expensive, too expensive, but we're making progress all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like that is very achievable. I mean, you must have seen in your career how farming has changed. So I'm talking about like the big farmlands with corn, and I see the guys in the combines and the tractors. They're all using GPS and little things, little joysticks to guide them. So I'm sure you've seen. Probably 50 years ago, that wasn't even a concept because we didn't have GPS satellites.
Right. No. Well, we're in our fourth wave of technology integration into agriculture. So artificial intelligence and robotics is the fourth wave. But the first one was mechanization, the first tractors, which would have been now over 100 years ago. Soon after that, we introduced fertilizers. So when you look at yields of crops, before there were tractors and fertilizers, we didn't produce much per acre. And that's why we needed one farmer for every 2 citizens in the country. We were not very efficient. Now one farmer produces enough food for hundreds of people in this country. That's because of efficiency. So tractors were the first wave, made us more efficient. Fertilizers were the second one. We doubled yields with fertilizers. Genetically improved crops back in the 70s, 80s were the third wave, and now AI and robotics are the fourth wave. We've got to be more efficient in agriculture. Our food is, we have a low-cost food policy in this country. We do not want our food to become too expensive like it is in many parts of the world. There's some parts of the world where you spend 50% of your income on food. We're well under 10% for the United States for our cost of our foods. We take it for granted as a result, but we shouldn't, because the food is cheap, not because of the quality or the input. It's because we find ways to keep our costs low. But we're going to have to continue to do that to remain a country where our food is affordable for everyone. So we're going to need new technologies. Just remember that whether it's Africa or the United States, there's no more land to put into cultivation, and there's no more water to grow crops with. We're going to have to find ways of increasing both the quality of our food and the yields that farmers produce on a given acre of land. So it could be an animal. We need to get the animals to grow faster and bigger, but same thing for plants. We need plants to grow faster and bigger and produce more nutrition all around. So we got our challenges ahead of us. This is kind of an arms race that probably will never stop. We will always have to find ways to become more efficient. But our farmers right now are on the edge. It's hard to make a living in farming. It's pretty good right now in a couple sectors like beef cattle. You all know what the beef cattle or steak price is in the market right now. But there's other sectors of our industry that is not doing as well. Citrus industry, for example, is the first one that comes to mind. We can't control the cost of what a farmer sells their crate of orange for, but we can help control the price of the inputs for production of those oranges. So we can find ways to reduce fertilizers, which helps our environment. We can find ways of reducing pesticides, which helps our environment as well. We can find ways for the farmer to be smarter about how they will market their crops. Forward marketing, for example, or it's what we call the futures market. There are all kinds of things that we can do for that, but AI is helping with all of that. It's making everyone smarter and allowing us to make better decisions.
You mentioned that you had spent some time in Africa with, an NGO or some nonprofit. Is there anything that you learned over there that you thought is something that you brought back with you? It's alternative technologies or just a farmer's mindset in terms of what they have traditionally done in agriculture in some of those areas. I'm just curious if anything you brought back with you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. I spent several years working and living sometimes in Africa. We had 23 offices around the continent. It's called IFDC. It's actually headquartered in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. But with 23 offices, I was all over the continent, not North Africa, but everywhere south of there. But the thing that I learned there that we were actually applying here in the United States, Africa was not nearly as well developed. I'll give you an example first, but then show you how in Africa they're using that for leapfrogging technology that we need to think about here in the United States too. In Africa, they'd never had landlines for phones. And actually turned out okay because that's when cell phones were introduced, and they realized we don't have to have this incredible investment in landlines like we do in the United States and Europe. Saved a ton of money as a result of that, and it's a much more efficient way of communicating. Now in Africa, there's still a lack of information to help farmers, especially the smallholder farmers who are sometimes subsistence farmers, get information to grow more food. It's not hard to grow more food in a lot of these countries. You just need a little bit of knowledge, maybe better seed, maybe a little bit of fertilizer. I've been in countries where they consider fertilizers to be poisons. And so they could quadruple their yields with fertilizer, but fertilizer is poison, and so they don't use it. And so just with a little bit of this myth-busting and education, they can produce a whole lot more food. And so in Africa, what we're looking at right now is to use AI instead of creating an entire extension service like we have in the United States. So we're going to leapfrog over kind of the system that we have built here and go directly to AI. Now, you will still need to have probably some people who teach others how to use it, how to interpret the information, but Africa doesn't need to invest in all the time and effort and money and capital and human resources that we have in this country for the extension service. So that lesson, though, has a lot of application in the United States. We're still going to have people on the ground. Because we will take this to the next AI level, which will need a lot more interpretation, and I'll give you an example of that in just a minute. But we're starting to train up all of our extension agents to become AI supported. So right now, when there's a question, you have to get on your phone and ask Siri, or you go back to your truck and you may have a manual in there that you flip through the pages and find the answer or identify that insect or that disease. It'll become a whole lot more efficient, and you'll have all the information using AI at your fingertips if appropriately managed. So one of the things that we're promoting right now for farmers are called digital twins, and this is a digital model of your entire farm. It would take an extension agent to teach you how to build it and teach you how to use it. But what this will do will be to allow a farmer to think about changes on their farm, or it could be an aquaculture facility, or it could be someone who manages natural resources. In fact, you can do this even for an entire city, and something county government may want to be thinking about creating a digital twin for their city. But here it would be, if it's a farm, you could say, I want to now grow fewer peanuts next season and grow more cotton. Do I need to buy another combine, or do I need to hire more people, or will I make less money or more money? You can now very accurately predict all of that. So everything that would be changed by your new, quote, good idea, you'll be able to really see whether or not that's something that you want to pursue. Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. But a digital twin, rather than just your intuition, right now farmers think, I think it would be a good idea to switch from cotton to peanuts next year because of the price. That may or may not be true. But with the digital twin, you'll get much closer to the actual answer. And so I predict in 5 years, most farmers in Florida are going to have a digital twin sitting on their laptop in their truck, and that they will, could be even, do I need to buy a new truck now to put my laptop in?
That's amazing.
It can help you predict what is best for whatever you have decided is the outcome that you desire.
And that's ready to go if someone wants to go ahead and map out their entire farmland?
Well, no, it's not. It's like everything else I've talked about. These are technologies that are so new that we are just starting to build them and scale them now. Well, we have built them. We haven't scaled them to the point that they will be commercially viable. We at the University of Florida, FAMU, we're not business people. We're not here to build businesses and to compete with private business. Our job is to help farmers, other private businesses, county governments become more efficient and effective at what they do. So we're the support team for everyone else in the state.
It's fantastic. We're almost on. I got one last question for you, and you may not want to answer it.
Is it a football question?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
What is phyto mining?
Oh, that's my own area of personal research. I've always a little bit of background. In the United States, we're running out of strategic metals, so nickel, rare earth elements, titanium. You read about this in the paper. China produces most of these materials now, and with our relationship with China, what if China decided they weren't going to ship us nickel anymore? We use that for batteries, for stainless steel, for all kinds of different things. So we need alternative sources for a lot of these metals rather than relying on countries that could potentially not be our friend in the future. They could easily bring the United States to its knees by withholding a lot of these strategic metals. So Phytomining is the use of plants to extract metals from soil, and then after that, you extract the metal out of the plant. So there's a lot of low-grade nickel in all kinds of soils all over our country. Not enough to mine, so it will never be commercially viable. But we've discovered some very unusual and specialized plants that collect and take up very high amounts of metal into their leaves. And a good example is when we mine rock out of the ground to extract nickel. That rock contains between 0.5% and 1% nickel. These plants contain 2% nickel in them, so they are much more valuable ore than the rock that we have traditionally mined. And mining's a dirty, metal mining especially. That's probably why we don't do a lot of it in this country anymore. We have no nickel mines left in the United States. But this is a green technology. It's clean. It captures carbon out of the air. So if you're worried about climate change, this is an added benefit. You can burn the biomass if you want and extract energy out of it. But basically, it's a way of using a plant to extract valuable metals out of the soil.
So you have sort of tethered yourself to one last piece of research, even though you've got larger responsibilities at the university. You're still doing a little bit of that?
Oh, it's my hobby.
Okay.
I would do this even if I wasn't working at a university.
Fantastic.
It's something I've worked on for literally decades, and I want to see this technology grow. And it's starting with the realization all of a sudden that our strategic supply of important and valuable metals is dwindling. It's all of a sudden it's seen a resurgence in its popularity and hopefully opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been fantastic.